Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And when I walked in here, I thought that Annette was going to be the person that I've known the longest. And then I ran into Gretchen when I was an intern at the Industry Neighborhood Council. So that's how I got my start. I was fortunate enough to be able to come through Ball State's planning department and have an internship at this Industry Neighborhood Council. Not knowing much about planning or not what I wanted to do as a career, and then found something I love doing. I have never left this field. I'm going to switch through some slides. I'll tell you right now, when you see some of the slides, I am not good at putting together PowerPoint presentations. There are going to be some things that look different, and Cinnaire has like a regular presentation that they use for like low-income housing tax credits, but I didn't like it, so I have my own that I'm using. So that's what you're going to see here. So you may see some grammar that may not be the best, but I at least tried. So who am I? I grew up in Cincinnati. My mother still lives in the same neighborhood that I grew up for like 52 or 53 years. She still lives in the neighborhood. So wherever I go back, I still have that. You heard I went to Northern Kentucky University, and then came here to Ball State, and I think it was 1990. Cinnaire. I've been at Cinnaire for 21 years, and I started off as one of our underwriters. So I was in the backtrack when I was at Industry Neighborhood Counseling. The person I worked for was Alice McIntosh, and one afternoon, Alice came back from this lunch meeting, really excited, and she drops this book on my desk that says Section 42, and she says, "We need to do this." And I read through a page and a half of it and closed it and said, "This is too complicated. This will never work. I'm not doing this," not knowing some years later it would be my career. So when I left Muncie, I went to work for this company, and as I'm talking, as I go through some of these slides, I'm going to be bouncing around today. If you have any questions, please stop me. It was hard for me trying to like put stuff in orders. I know there's probably things I forgot or some things that I want to make sure I address any kind of. So when I left Muncie, I think it was in '93, I went to work for this company called the Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. And at the time, what they were doing is the Lilly Endowment was starting to invest money into community development corporations all around the state, and there were and INHP. What I did at INHP was they were investing in these 14 neighborhoods, community development corporations with these neighborhood associations, and INHP provided operating support. And at the time, INHP was giving, and this was in the early 90s, mid 90s, was giving all these community development corporations $100,000 a year just for operating support so they can just get off the ground. So I stayed there for about a couple of years, and then I went to work for this national organization called Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, in the mid 90s. And one of my territory was Muncie and Evansville. So one week I spent here in Muncie. The next week I would spend all week down in Evansville. And what I learned at LISC was I learned how to underwrite all different types of real estate, from home ownership to rental to commercial, and it was introduced to low-income housing tax credits. And what was hard for me is I would be in an Indianapolis neighborhood, and I was doing a site visit, and it was so depressing for me that sometimes I'll just do it early in the morning where I didn't have to see anything or people. And then one afternoon I was doing a site visit, and this young lady comes up to me and asks me what I'm doing. And I said, "I'm looking at doing a new house in development here." She says, "Good, but I want to live up there." So she was pointing up to like Fishers. And And then some years ago, I got approached by a friend of mine had moved to Lansing, Michigan, where Cinnaire is headquartered. And at the time, we were called Michigan Capital Fund for Housing, and there was this entity that they had started, other nonprofit called Indiana Capital Fund for Housing, and they were looking for an underwriter to low-income housing tax credits for Indiana. And I loved working for LIST, never wanted to leave, and met with the president at now Cinnaire, and what he was telling me, he said, as much as you like doing urban redevelopment, what you get to do here is you get to have an impact in a lot of different communities, from urban to rural to suburban communities. And that was the sell and what got me to move to Muncie. So I was there underwriting for about 5 years, and then I got called in, and we started expanding into Wisconsin. I got called in and said, I thought I was getting Michigan State basketball tickets from my chief operating officer, because he was my Michigan State basketball hookup, and he said, we want you to move to Madison and open up an office, and switch over from underwriting to business development. So I went up there and did that for about 8 or 9 years, and got another call saying, we don't want to ask you and the family to move another time, but we're having retirements down in Indiana. We just can't put anyone back down in Indiana. And he says, we want you all to come back. So we ended up coming back. So as part of my duties, I cover, and what Cinnaire does is we're a community development. I had to put the industry neighborhood council picture on here. So what we are is we're a community development financial institution that invests in multifamily affordable housing pretty much all throughout the Midwest. And this shows all the states that we're in. Look, we started off as a low-income housing tax credit investor, and what we started to notice is we started noticing that we were working with didn't want to do the smaller loans, so we set up a lending company, and then we also started to notice that in some of our communities it was hard getting title in some of our developments, so we went and bought a title company. We have this company called Cinnaire Title, and then and this is when I was in. We were living in Michigan. I was taking my wife through some of the Detroit neighborhoods and showing her all the great housing we were putting up. And her next comment to me was, "Yeah, that's good, but there's nothing around it." Getting involved in this program called New Markets Tax Credits. And New Markets Tax Credits, what that has allowed us to do as a company is it has allowed us to invest in other things, the affordable housing that we're investing in. So we specify what we use it for. We use it mostly for community centers, charter schools, grocery stores, things that help bring back some of the stuff that used to be in neighborhoods a long time ago. So that's one of the part. On the low-income housing tax credit side, we invest in network throughout our footprint. The other thing we do is that on those developments we provide a lot of permanent debt. So if you're doing a development, either tax credit or non-tax credit, we have the ability to provide acquisition, pre-development money, and some permanent financing. And when we're doing the pre-development and acquisition financing, we especially with some of the non-tax credit deals, I know some of our smaller organizations that we work with, it's expensive to start to pay for some of the early due diligence, like appraisals, market studies. So we've been pretty flexible, and then also going to get a contractor to get out your costs. And we know that in some of our communities we have issues with the appraisals. So what we've been flexible on is if that developer has either for-profit or nonprofit has been able to tell their story and being able to justify the costs, instead of lending from loan to value, we'll lend loan to cost, as long as they can tell us their story how they're going to take us out. And while some financial institutions may lend at 75 or 80% loan to value, we're able to go up to, if you have all your financing committed, have the ability to go up to 90%. And if you're doing something that's a little bit more speculative, but have a way to take us out, we're able to do that at 75% loan to value. This, I'm not sure. Okay. This shows pretty much everything that we've done in Indiana, which when I came back, I didn't realize how dispersed and we were around the state until as I was driving around some of these communities, came back. And I have always used interns in my offices because I wouldn't be standing here if it weren't for the ability to get interns. So all of our people who are head of our offices have the ability to have interns. I've been one of the few that have done it because I just wouldn't be sitting here. So came back and I had an intern. And if you go to our Indianapolis, we have a big map that shows all these developments dispersed throughout the state. So you can see we're in a lot of different areas, from urban, rural to suburban. So one of the things that I was asked to do is basically talk about just an introduction to how low-income housing tax credits work. So that's what I'm going to go through, and at any time, just stop me if you need me to explain something in a little bit more detail. So using low-income housing tax credits. So there's an affordable. Let me get through this next one. So low income, and you'll see this in other credits. As an investor, we get to take tax credits, which you'll see later in a later slide over a 10-year period. But we invest in these developments for a period of 15 years. And so the compliance period is 15 years, and then sometime after we get all of our tax credits and our benefit after we want to get out. So if it's a nonprofit, we basically we basically sell it to the nonprofit developer at whatever debt is left on it plus $1. If it's a for-profit developer, we want to see an appraisal and make sure that we get a exit price. So that's we would like to exit the partnership. Because the low-income housing tax credit is getting a lot more competitive, that in order to get an award, you've got to check the box to get more points to say that you're going to keep the house in affordable past 15 years. So you'll see this extended use period get extended past the 15 years. What do low-income housing tax credits do? It's basically it's a subsidy for the production and preservation of affordable rental housing. Most of the units, to be able to use low-income housing tax credits, they has to be rented to individuals and families making either 60% of area median income or below. And for the benefit it is for the investor is that, so most of our investors are banks and insurance companies, mostly corporations that have taxable income. So unlike a charitable donation where somebody can make a charitable donation, you get to take a percentage of it off of your annual return. For low-income housing tax credits, that investor gets to take dollar for dollar off their profits. So in addition to getting a dollar for dollar, some of these deals have commercial real estate has losses. They get to take the advantage of losses. So in addition to doing dollar for dollar, they also get a return. So it's not necessarily a grant that they're giving to us. How do they work? The tax credits, the IRS awards tax credits to state housing agencies, and in this instance is our Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, and this gets approved through a annual qualified allocation plan that they have that lasts for 2 years, and then they score the applications based off of the qualified allocation plan, and then what that developer will get is they'll get a certificate. So and you'll see this later, if they get a certificate, they get $1 million of low-income housing tax credits from our state housing agency. They get to take that $1 million over 10 years. So that certificate is worth $10 million. So what they will do is they'll come to investors and banks like Cinnaire and ask us to purchase that certificate, which is worth $10 million. And what we do is we will purchase that, but we won't give them the entire $10 million that it's worth, because we have to get also a certain return to the investor. So we purchase it at a discount. So depending on if I'm in a rural community, that may be closer to 80 cents on the dollar. If I'm in an area that has where some of the banks have community reinvestment tests that they need to meet, then that pricing is going to be, that may be anywhere from 85 to over 90 cents on the dollar, and we get to take that for a period of 10 years. So next is shows how the tax credits are estimated how the tax credits come to the state. So it's based off of population. So in 2022, the estimated population in Indiana was a little over $7.1 million. So the IRS awards the tax credits based off a dollar amount. And before, when the programs first started, I think it was $1.50 or so. Now it's up to $2.65 for 2022. So in this instance, our housing agency received approximately almost $19 million in annual tax credits that they get to award to developments across the state. So how do they distribute these credits? As I mentioned, there's a qualified allocation plan that the state agency puts out, and what they do is, for those credits, they have set-aside categories. In this instance, with the current qualified allocation plan, 15% go to nonprofits. So if you're a nonprofit and you have to pick which category you're going to apply to, you can apply to that set aside. The community integration of 10% is something new. One of the things that we started to see is that at one point we were doing, some developers were doing a lot of permanent supportive housing, and 100% of us are permanent supportive housing. And if you've ever done a permanent supportive housing deal, there's a lot of services that come in there, and a lot of other different complexities that come in terms of the services that make those so much harder. So one of the things that they decided to do is that maybe we need to have another category where we have some regular rental housing, and then we have a percentage of permanent supportive housing, so it's not 100%. So that's what the community integration is. Then 15% is for large cities, 15% for small cities, 15% for rural. They have a 10% preservation, so you're redoing an existing building, you can go through that set-aside. And then there's this 10% for this housing first. The housing first is the permanent supportive housing set-aside. And then there's a general set-aside of 10%, and what the executive director for IHCDA has the ability to do with that general set-aside, he uses that for special projects. So one year it may be permanent supportive housing, one year it may be workforce housing. I'm not sure what it was this past year. It was trying to get, he used the 10% to try to get more developers of color to apply for low-income housing tax credits. Yes?
So in order to go for the community integration, do you have to go through the Permanent Supportive Housing Institute, or only have to go through the Institute for the Housing First Set-Aside?
Just for the housing first set-aside.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a question too.
Yes.
So who determines the percentages? Is that something that Indiana Housing does annually, or how does that work?
So so the QAP is every 2 years. So the one that's ending is, I think it ends for this 24 round of low-income housing tax credit. So starting next year, they've got to revise that plan, that qualified allocation plan. So they will draft these set-asides, but there are a couple of trade associations here in the state. One is called the Indiana Affordable Housing Council. It's most of the low-income housing tax credit developers, some investors, property management, banks. So that's who's on there. And then there's another trade association that's a more statewide community economic. It's Prosperity Indiana. So those are the two main organizations that have a vested interest in this. So what ICDA will do is they'll try to draft the qualified allocation plan, but both of those trade associations are going to also draft their own. So there's going to be a lot of lobbying in terms of what these set-asides should be, what should be in the qualified allocation plan. And so if there's some sort of changes that you want to see, probably the better organization to probably work through is Prosperity Indiana, because it's a lot more broad-based in terms of its leadership. I sit on the Affordable Housing Council board also, and as much as I like it, it's pretty much protecting what we're currently doing. So now I'm going to get into just how low-income housing tax credits work and are put together. And so if you want to look at how a fund looks, so what we will do is that we will raise a low-income housing tax credit fund. So right now we're getting ready to, we're working on our Fund 40. So Fund 39 that we just closed. So Fund 39 will be about $200 million, and in that fund, it will have about 40 to 50 different affordable housing developments throughout our 9-state footprint. So what you'll see is there's a limited partner set up 99.9%, which is our investors. And then the general partner interest is Cinnaire for this Fund 39. And then what we do is that we take the money that we have in those funds and we invest them in all of these different developments around our footprints. And then the ownership ends up being a little bit different, where in these development partnerships, Cinnaire, we're the limited partner at 99.99%, and then the developer is the general partner at 0.1%. But that general partner or developer, they're responsible for all the day-to-day operations for that development. What has been different about low-income housing tax credits compared to other commercial rental real estate is that our foreclosure rate, I think, is probably less than 1%. And part of that is most of our developments don't have much debt. Most of the rents are below market, so we don't have much market risk. And then you have outside of the bank, you have an investor that if a development doesn't perform, for us as an investor, there's a risk that the property goes into default and we have to pay back the credits. So what we do is that once we close into one of these developments, we have asset managers. We have a construction asset manager that makes sure that the developer is doing everything they're saying they're doing through construction. And then once it gets leased up, I have a stabilized asset manager that watches over that property. And then in some instances, when properties have a little bit of stress and they need a little bit more attention because they aren't operating based off of how they were projected, we have our troubled asset property managers, and they're a lot more day to day in making sure that these developments are delivering what they're supposed to do. So what that ends up doing is that helps secure and make sure that developments are staying on the right track. What do tax credits finance? As you heard me say, they can be used in urban, rural, and suburban communities. It can be used for new construction, rehabilitation, and acquisition of buildings and soft costs. Affordability requirements. So when you go and fill out a low-income housing tax credit application, there are a couple set-asides you have to. There are one or two boxes you have to check. You have to check a box that says you're gonna that at least 40% of the units will remain at 60% or below area median income. And then the other box you have the ability to check is that at least 20% have to be at 50% or below of area median income. The majority of the developments that get done around the country are at this 40%, 50% area median income. So there are different credit types. There's the 9% credit. There's an acquisition, and I'll explain these later as I go through the slide. And there's a 4% tax credits for new construction and also rehab deals using tax-exempt bonds. So during the competitive process, for 2022, for the deals that were awarded last year, there were 33 developments submitted, and of that 33, 17 received awards around the state. Okay, 4%. If you're using 4% low-income housing tax credits, you can only, or if you're applying for 9% and you're going using an existing building, so what you would have to do is for the rehab or that you're doing in that building, you can use for 9%, and you get a credit for at 9% for the construction. But for the acquisition, since it's not as much work, they only give you credits for 4% instead of 9%. The 4% credits, those are this used to be not competitive in the state, and when it's interesting, when COVID hit, we started to notice a change in some of our markets. Is that in a lot of the communities that we work around in Indiana, once we get to 50% of area median income, we're at market rate in most of our communities. And when COVID hit and we started seeing rental prices, rates just elevate. And, I think in Indy, I was at something this morning in Indy, and it said that the rates have gone up over 30% just in Indianapolis. What it's done is it's had a lot of developers go after 4% low-income housing tax credits because it wasn't as competitive and you could apply every month. And then last year, the state of Indiana got oversubscribed and have decided that now they're only going to have one round a year for both their 4% and 9% round, which is at the end of July every year. So I'm going to go into a little bit more technical things about tax credits. So one of the things that you have to do is you're trying to determine what you qualify for tax credits annually, and that's based off of what you can include in depreciable basis, eligible basis. So some things that you can include in there are building acquisition, which I said you can only take a 4% credit on there. You can take your cost of your construction, some of your direct site costs, some of your construction financing fees, developers' fees, and soft costs. So everything that's related towards you building the development, including legal fees, you can take tax credit basis for. The things that you can't take credit for, tax credits for, or there are other costs that once a property is leased up and you're starting to lease up, are certain things like your permanent financing fees and legal fees that you can't take tax credits for. The other things that you have the ability to do is that if you're in a difficult development area or qualified census tract, instead of getting, if you have $1 million, instead of getting $1 million of credit, you can put in a 30% basis boost in there. And instead of qualifying for $1 million in tax credits, you qualify for 1.3. So that just gives you a lot more equity and incentive to develop in the more difficult to develop areas. So a lot of this is based off of area median incomes. So I went and pulled the area median income for Muncie for 2023 for a family of 4, and it is $70,100 for a family of 4. So you're going to see as I go through these other slides exactly how that gets used. So one of the things that the tax credits use, we look at percent of area median income. So we look at families that are making 30, 40, 50%, 60% area median income. And what this chart here does is it basically just shows you that for one person, that if their income is just at 30% of median income, this is $16,590 is the most that they can make. If you go to 50%, you see that's $27,650. If you go to like a 4-person household and you look at what they're at 60% of area median income, you see that's $47,340. And then all the way down to households up to 12 people. So as I go on to other slides, you'll see further how this starts to get used. So one of the things that you do, what this does, is it takes the rent at those different income levels, and it tells you at each area median income, it tells you the most that you can charge for rent or that family can pay if you're assuming someone's paying only 30% of their income towards their housing. So if someone is in a one bedroom and they're making 30% area median income, they can't afford to pay more than $444 a month for rent in Muncie. If there's a family that's in a 3-bedroom unit and that family his income is at 50% of area median income, they can't afford to pay more than a little over $1,000. So one of the things when we used to, when Cinnaire was younger, like now everything that we do goes through like an internal investment and loan committee. So you have a lot of people, and in those committees we have to have representation from somebody from legal or legal counsel, executive leadership, underwriting, asset management. But before then, what we used to do is when we were younger, we would have the investors that were our investment committee. And what we learned is that even though they are investing in this program called low-income housing tax credits, we didn't think they knew necessarily what they were investing in. So we figured out that we had to personalize it so to show that to them. And then one of the other things I learned is that when I was covering Wisconsin, and I had the Apartment Owners Association ask me to do a presentation to some of the association members, I knew that as soon as they heard the word low-income housing tax credits, that they're going to be ready to beat me up. So I learned how to personalize it. So one of the things we're doing, I sit on a nonprofit board in Hamilton County called Hamilton Area Neighborhood Development. And if you're in Hamilton County, if you didn't understand the word NIMBYism, it's there. So what we learned to do is that we've learned how to take those rents and those incomes and start to personalize it. So someone who's making 30% of area median income, it shows what their professions are. So it's a cashier, someone working in fast food. If someone is making 50% of area median income, this shows, and if I go back to like even the 30% unit, it shows that in order to afford a 30% unit, you can't make any more. You have to make at least $8.88. And if you look at what minimum wage is, you'll see that we have families we keep talking about low income as being 30%. We have a lot of people in our community that don't even earn enough money to afford a 30% unit. So it goes on down here to if someone's in a 60% unit, they're making a little over $49,000 or almost $25 an hour, and that's your bookkeepers, your firefighters, electricians, and some educators. So now what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to go into how we start to calculate low-income housing tax credits. Let me make sure I'm watching my time. So I'm going to start with debt and equity calculation. So I'm going to give you a basic one, and then when I get to the end, I'm going to give you a detailed one that we invested in. So this one I made up. So what I did here is I tried to make a couple assumptions. I assumed that you're going to develop a 50-unit affordable housing development with 5 units at 30%, 11 units at 50%, 2 bedrooms, and then basically 34 3-bedrooms at 30 to 50% of area median income. So what this does is it shows how much in rent that I can charge at these AMI limits each month, and then the next column shows what the monthly income is for all those units, and then the final one shows what the income is for the total years. So what I do next is I'll go to further trying to figure out how much of a mortgage I can afford with almost $518 in annual revenue. So one of the things that we always do is that I took the annual revenue from the previous page, and we always assume a vacancy rate. And we always assume a vacancy rate, our underwriting are 7%. I'll tell you that in a lot of instances in some of our communities, that vacancy rate was actually higher than that. Tell you since COVID, not anymore. Most of the developments that we're involved in, the vacancy rates are well under 5%. But in this instance, we just assumed a 7% vacancy. So we took $36,000 out. So that gives us a net rental income of $482,000. We assumed that it's going to cost $5,000 a year for each unit to operate that property. So that's $250,000 that we have to take out. The other thing that you will see in affordable housing developments that you don't necessarily see in other commercial real estate, that once it's completed, we budget this thing called a rent-up reserve. So what we assumed here is that a rent-up reserve of $350 per unit per year. So that gets put into a separate reserve account. And the reason why we do that is what we've learned. If you look at the regular, even the homes that some of us may be in, at a certain period of time, like 5 years, 10 years, there are certain things like appliances, carpet that need to be replaced. And instead of that having to come off the cash flow from that development, we put up a reserve that to help do those replacements. The other thing that's not in here that you'll see once I get to the more detailed pro forma is that, and this is why this housing has been so successful, is that we have these replacement reserves that we budget for, and then we will take an operating reserve. So what we'll do is that we'll take the total debt and expenses for the development for a year, and we will divide that by 2 and put in a 6-month operating reserve that we capitalize when we close into the deal. So what that does, if for some reason your vacancy rate happens to be 10, 15%, and you start to have negative cash flow, or for some reason, as much as you tried, you're not getting the rents that you projected, or your operating costs end up being higher and you have a deficit, that money helps cover that. So that's what makes this so safe of a development, that you have a couple of backstops that the investor has from having a set of eyes, and then you have these reserves that other commercial real estate doesn't necessarily have in terms of already a capitalized replacement reserve and this operating reserve. So once I take those out, the net operating income is $17,500. Most lenders lend our underwriting guidelines that for every dollar of expenses you have to have $1.20 in revenue. So what we do is that to determine debt, we divide that net rental income by 1.2. So what that does, after I take that out, it says you can pay a mortgage of almost $179,000 annually, or monthly, that's almost $15,000. And what I did here is I assumed that the interest rate was going to be 7%. The term was going to be 18 years, but the amortization period was going to be 30 years. So what that computes to is computes to a total mortgage of $2.24 million. So as I move on to other things, I mentioned that this thing called how do you determine tax credit basis. So in this example here, I show that the land is going to cost you $800,000. Your construction costs $5.4 million. Here are some of the other soft costs that you have in terms of your market study, your accounting, your developer fee. And then here, I mentioned operating reserves that get put into the development budget, and then permanent loan fees equals $600,000. So, which gives you a total development cost of $7.9 million. But the one thing that we can't count in basis are operating reserves and perm loan fees, things that are associated once the property is in operations. So that ends up giving you a total eligible basis of $6.5 million.
Where's the other, so you can't count the operating reserve of the perm loan fees?
Yeah, anything related to the operations of the property, you can't count in a tax credit basis.
So that's 600,000, but you're taking them, okay, never mind. I see. I was looking at the 800,000, but that's your land.
Yeah, so I took the land out of there too. So I took the 800 and then I took the 600 out.
Yeah.
So what that does is that if I have my total development cost of 7.9 and my mortgage amount is 2.4, my gap is 5.7 million that I have to try to cover. So on the next one, what this does is it calculates the 9% tax credit. So I took the eligible basis of 6.5 million and I multiplied it by 9%, which means the annual credits is $589,000 a year. Multiplied by 10 years, it's almost $5 million of equity that you're eligible for. Again, I told you investors don't pay you dollar for dollar. So in this instance, I assume that this is something as an investor we really wanted. So we're going to pay you a premium price of 90 cents. So what that does is this brings you $5.3 million of equity into your deal. So okay, I'm waiting for the next one to come through. Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. So when you take the total development cost of 7.9, you take your mortgage amount of 2.4, and then your equity amount from your investor of 5.3, it shows you have a gap of a little over $400,000 that you still need to come up with. When I go to the 4% example, you're going to see something. You're going to see that the mortgage that you only qualify at 4% instead of the 5.3 million. With the 4% credits, you only have equity of 2.3 million, so your gap's a lot higher at 3.3. So what we usually see with the 4% deals, in order to get those to work, those have to have a lot higher rent. So the 9% deals, the nice part about it allows you to really target the lower area median incomes in your communities. What the 4% does is, what you'll see is that I consider like our 4% deal more like more of our workforce housing for those persons who are earlier in their careers coming out of college. They make too much to afford the lower deeply subsidized housing, but they don't make enough to afford the market rate housing in their communities. So what this does is that this gap usually gets covered through, those deals have a lot more debt. So like most of the 9% deals that we have, that we work on, the debt is rarely more than 30%. Most of it, some of the developments we do have zero debt on it. And when you start doing a 4% deal where you're targeting higher incomes, you're going to have a higher mortgage amount to help cover some of these costs. So how do you fill the gap? Foundations, city, Federal Home Loan Bank, Affordable Housing Program. You can defer, we'll allow you to defer up to 50% of your development fee that you have in there, as long as you can show that you can pay it back within 13 to 14 years. And if there's still a gap, then you may just have to, that means you start making your own contributions to make everything balance. So this just shows who's just all involved in a low-income housing tax credit closing between the developer, lender, general contractor, title company, environmental company, property management company, insurance. So when I bring in deals, our process is I have an underwriting analyst who I took from Ball State. And Natalie underwrites everything that I bring in. So she brings it to the point where I get it to a commitment with the developer. And then when I turn it over to my closing underwriters, it's a little bit of a different skill level where my analyst is all technical in terms of me getting a deal that works for a developer and also for us and our investors. What the closing underwriters is, and this is what I've had to tell them, I said their position is a little bit different, is that they've got to have all those technical skills, but they've got to have all these other soft people skills. And what I've told them, I said that your success is dependent on you working through all these people who are involved in our closing costs, who do not sit on a Cinnaire payroll, and getting them to a commonality and being able to agree to get you through a closing. That's been, I tell you, that's 50% of the work, is trying to make sure everybody gets along and understands what deadlines there are, even though they don't report to you. So that's just a general of how tax credit works. What I'm about to show you now is a real deal that we did in Illinois, and just the detail that as a tax credit investor that we look at. So we go in there and we look at all the different area median incomes. We look at the number of units. And then the other thing we have to do is that when we're looking at that gross rent that we can charge for the units, is that we have to subtract what the utility costs are going to be in there. So we have to subtract that from the rents. And then we also do, as part of our due diligence, we try to compare what the square footage is. Yes? I'm going to try. I want to try to make it bigger.
I was gonna say, Keith sent the copies of this presentation, so maybe Joe can help.
Unless someone can help me make it bigger, I'm not sure how to do it. You can walk up and then ask me a question. We have an IT person inside Cinnaire. I told him I was job security for him.
What's the normal range or percentage for the developer fee on these?
So it's complicated for ICDA because they base it off like the first 200,000 is this percentage, maybe 10. So it's if I were to just guess, it's probably average of. Huh?
Oh, look at that.
You may need to stay up here because, no, I need him to stay up here because I have some other ones that are just as small.
Well, the problem is it's a zoom in function. You have to move the screen so
That's what he's looking at, stay up there.
yeah. So I'll stay with you.
When my son when they shut down his school, college, and he had to come home, you don't know how happy my wife is. It's like free technical assistance.
Yeah, so I think this is what you were explaining part of this a minute ago, and I'll just scroll across the screen as you.
Yeah, this just shows just in a lot more detail of everything that we look at. So when we're going in there, like the develop one of the things that you're going to do as a developer, you're going to submit a market study to us, and then we're going to go in there and we're going to compare that what's in that market study in terms of what that market study is saying that you can get into rent. That market study also tells us how long it's going to take you to lease up your property. So we go out and we evaluate all that. And then the other thing we do is we also say that the market study was done by a developer. It's going to say what the developer wants to say. We order our own third party just to verify everything in that market study.
All right.
Okay, so that's it. So you may want to. I got another one.
All right.
That's also tiny. So this shows just a lot more detail in terms of like the operating expenses that we look at. So we look at it, this shows us everything that we look at in terms of, with the management, what's it gonna cost, what the legal is gonna cost. If you're paying, if it's a, if it's an apartment building, you're gonna have some like common area utilities that you have to pay. And then if you go down, you'll see just what some of the, just the general cost are, repairs and maintenance. And one of the things that we started to see, like here, it says insurance is $61,000 or $1,000 a unit. What we saw during COVID is that usually before COVID we would have we would see insurance around $150 to $200 per unit per year for insurance. And when COVID hit, we started seeing that insurance has spiked. So if something comes into us and the insurance is less than $350 per unit per year, we start to question it, and we make sure that if it's lower than that, that they provide us with a quote justifying why they're getting that lower amount. Yes.
Do you guys have a set limit on how much insurance coverage is? Like, does it have to be at 80% or is there a cost adjustment?
Yeah, so we have in terms of like if there's if something happens, you have to file a claim against it. We have some requirements about what the minimum amounts need to be in our partnership agreements. I probably should know that as much as I look at it, but I don't remember what that amount is right now.
I've seen people take less, they'll reduce their insurance coverage just to save.
Yeah, we watch that. Yeah. And we know also from like just on renters, when we try like different apartments use require residents that have renters insurance, we also know that after they come into our units, they try to cancel it the next day.
Going to the next.
Yeah, so that just shows you like here it's just basically saying that at the bottom is we're assuming $5,851 that it costs to operate each unit per year. So, and what we do to justify all that is that if I'm doing a 50-unit development, new construction in Muncie, what myself and mostly my underwriter will do is we'll go to our asset manager and say, we're working in a community this size population with this type of development, new construction, send us comparables. So we have, since we've invested in so many different developments, we can pull through our database and get a number of comparable properties to put up against yours. So this is my biggest negotiation with my developers, especially now since these deals are so much harder and our developers are trying to squeeze things and telling us that they can operate them less than anyone else can. This has been one of my bigger negotiating points. Okay, so then I think the next one is that one.
Is there a minimum number of units in order to do a tax credit?
Yeah, it's. I mean, if you're probably less than 35, it just doesn't make sense. It's hard to get it to work. So what this does, this shows you all the different sources of financing that you have, and it goes what the rates, what the terms are. Yeah, you keep going over. It shows what the total loan amount is, what the amortization period is, what the interest rates are.
Slide down.
Yep. And go over it. And this shows you what we're paying for the low. On this instance, we're only paying 85 cents on the dollar. Let's go over to the right. For the tax credits, and they're getting almost $13 million of tax credits. And keep going over to the right. Okay. Okay, and if you go down, it shows you what the total sources are of 19.2 million, and then this should be the final slide, the next one. Now you see why I've had to start wearing glasses.
That's still small.
Yeah, you still need like. Yes, so cool. I told you my underwriter, she's from here, Natalie. Natalie's like 27 or 28. She sent me something yesterday. I said, Natalie, you know I can't see that. Okay. Yeah, go over to the right. So and go up. So this just you see here. It shows all the detail of how we're estimating all the cost. So it's pretty detailed on what the construction costs are. What's not in here is that we also try to figure out what the contractor fees are. So in this instance, it was all baked in that $12.7 million number. Otherwise, you would have saw in more detail what the general requirements, builder overhead is, and profit. And since it's not in here, we closed this. We verified it in that contract that they had with the general contractor that 12.7 million included all the other costs. We put appliances, and then you see all there are a lot of third-party costs in here between the architect, the environmentals, keep going down. Building permits, there's the insurance that you have to pay while it's under construction, there's the appraisals, the utilities they have to get paid. It shows here in this instance they're getting a development fee of what, $1.77 million, and keep going down. And it gets even more detailed. Construction origination fees, the inspections, the bank construction legal fee, interest expense, permanent loan fees, all this, the state housing agency where you see the tax credit fees of $152,000. Once you get an award from ICDA, the security credits, they make you pay a fee, and that's the fee that you pay to the state housing agency for them reviewing and awarding you the credit. And then here you see the operating reserve I talked about, and then the replacement reserve. And this one had this, yep, so that's it. Yeah, so I'm not sure what that one is. This is the same thing. So that's it. So the other ones he's got, I just need to really get to that because oh, I'm sorry, I missed one.
Let me go back.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. So what we do is I take all the gross rent, I take the vacancies, I get my net rental income, and then I take all of the annual expenses, and this one, it starts in 24, 25. This goes out on our financial model, it goes out 30 years. Yeah, so we look at all of that. So that's some of the analysis that we do. We make sure that we're watching and what if there are different blips, do we still have enough income and expenses to cover this? Just keep going down. Yeah, you start to see what the debt service payments are, what the debt coverage ratios are.
I think that's the bottom.
Okay, and that's it. Okay.
Keith, what was the percentage of contingency for like development?
On this one, this was an Illinois deal, and it was. I think it was probably. You mean the contingency or development fee?
The contingency for the cost of the development.
Oh, so it differs. So if we're doing a new construction development, we put a construction contingency of 5%. If we're doing an acquisition rehab, that's 10 to 15%. If we're doing a historic rehab, that's going to be anywhere from 10 to 20%.
Yeah.
Because there's just stuff that even when you're doing rehabs, as much as you think you've estimated your cost, things come up. And our thing is, and that also just, deals get tight, the developers also negotiate that too.
I might need you to send me an email so I can forward that to your we reduced our, on a new construction.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
We reduced it to 5%. We were questioning about that, and I was like, well, with the new construction, we're not expecting, plus we had already built one of the houses in that project. Like, we knew just about everything. The site was just right next door, so on and so forth. So we reduced it to 5%, but they were questioning that. The other thing, though, that we had to do with recent projects since COVID, not only do we have to have contingency in there, usually that's like if something comes up as a surprise within the construction, right? But from the time that we did our budgets to when our GC and subs were actually working, there were changes in cost of materials and labor. So we had a little contingency and a process for them to be able to request, like if they could show that there were market changes that could justify a cost increase.
Okay. We've been looking at this close. It's been miserable. Every deal that people, I'll have new staff come in there and say, this has got to be easy for you now. I said, I said, I come in and I said, I learn something new every day, even though I walk into work not anticipating that I want to learn something new and something always. And we still don't have. up until April, I thought we were having a little bit better control of construction costs, and I'm seeing them go back up again. And then I had some deals that I was doing, like the 4% deals that we were doing, which have a lot, like you hear me say, have a lot more market rate risk. I was loving it because interest rates were low. Even if the deals had higher operating expenses or the cost went up, just go borrow more money. And then mid-August hit, and I had one developer that was trying to over-negotiate us. And what we usually do is that we're a nonprofit. We try to provide a good service to our partners. So even if the deal goes past, like the closing deadline, we don't like adjust pricing. But you have to have something signed with us. Well, they were over-negotiating us. And by the time they started over-negotiating us and taking more time instead of signing a letter, interest rates went up, and their deal didn't work anymore. And if they would have signed it and like trusted us, we would have stayed and honored their pricing. So what I'm running into now is the interest rates have still been have been hard, and like especially during construction now, like when we do the perm, it is it's fixed, but during that construction period, it's floating. So that's been uncontrollable, and then the costs are going back. The costs. We say 90 days to get closed, and I don't remember last time I've seen a deal get closed in 90 days. And one of the deals that we were bidding on in Northern Illinois, and the developer he saw the timeline and he said, "I want to sign with you all, but we're nervous about this timeline." And I told him, I said, "Chase, one of the things I've told our underwriters, because sometimes our underwriters are like hard and they'll say, no. I said, never tell a developer they're not going to hit their closing date. Tell them you believe them. Even though I said in the back we're running that different. So when he told me that, I said, Chase, don't take this personally. I knew you weren't hitting that. But if I would have told you that, you would have said, I don't believe in your dream or your vision. So I said, we run our own back end analysis, but everything has been going up. I had an underwriter when we went to investment committee on deal, actually investment committee, should he have brought the original commitment on this deal had taken like 8 or 9 months to get closed. He says, should I have brought the original commitment letter? And I laughed and said, why? None of it looked the same. So these are some deals that I did. This was in Walkerton, Indiana. This is one of my favorite ones. This was right when the economy had crashed. And this deal was 100 and something units, temporary World War II housing in Walkerton, Indiana, just south of South Bend. And Cinnaire had to downsize when the economy hit, so I had to go back to underwriting. And then Ann Mannix. Ann was a developer on this, and she was explaining the deal to me, and she said, I can't explain it to you, you need to come here. So I go there, and I'm walking through, they had 10-foot wide streets. And the house, and you're walking through, you could like fall through. So I thought I was in the deep south, and I didn't even realize we had housing that bad in the north. And we ended up, at the time we had all the other subsidy money. There were some residents there. We needed them to go mess up somebody else's community, so we gave them what the cost of their rent was for 5 years and told them buy, and we tore down all those 100 units and put up like 37 units. And it says 40 units, and they're 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. And we basically recreated a whole subdivision in that community. This is a deal with the Champaign Housing Authority that we did. This is in Peoria, Illinois, with a nonprofit Peoria Opportunities Fund. That they did a lot. They're in one of the urban neighborhoods, so that they did a lot of infill and rehab. This one is in Indianapolis. This was a deal that I had worked on. It was a year 15 deal, so it needed to be rehabbed. And this was one where it was with Westside Community Development Corporation, where they were going to do a 4% deal, and the nonprofit hadn't raised rents in over 10 years. So the property got upside down. And then as we were doing our due diligence, and there were like 40-something homes, I had 2 or 3 other underwriters with me, and we knew we had to raise the rents. And when we went in there, we did our due diligence. We noticed one is that most of the residents there, that even though the rents were depressed, could have been higher. Most of them couldn't afford anymore. And then we also realized that our nonprofit was the worst landlord in the community. So we had to go back to them and tell them, we like you, but you can't manage me anymore. And then we decided that they needed more rehab. So we said this needs to be a 9% deal. Well, they could have sued us, but we broke the commitment because we said this isn't going to work. And they ended up getting a 9% award, and this ended up being. This is a big one for me because when I moved to Indianapolis from here, I was asked to do a survey with the Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Park because the city was trying to redevelop the King Park area around Fall Creek. And I remember walking into the senior's house because I was asked to survey all the homes there, and I remember her telling me to get out. She didn't want me in her house, her neighborhood. She didn't want to see her neighborhood improve. I didn't understand, being in my mid-20s, why she didn't want to see her neighborhood improve until I left Indy and came back and realized why she made that comment to me, because her neighborhood had gentrified. So I lost that and I was early in my career. And then when I came back, there was a deal in Fountain Square that I was with List that I did, where we had a year 15 deal. Our community development corporation was struggling, and we had developed this affordable housing deal, and we're hoping people would come in that bad neighborhood and rent. And now that Fountain Square, as you know, has exploded, the nonprofit was struggling, and it was the Community Foundation, List, Cinnaire, Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partner. We all put in a bid to try to save the development. We got outbid. So all those families that were there while that neighborhood was bad didn't get the luxury of staying in there while it was flourishing. So that's the second one I lost. On this one of the things I always tell people when I go into communities, I say, I know your community is changing before you do. It's like, what do you mean? I said, because I see all the market studies that the developers are sending me, and I saw IUPUI growing. I saw the hospital growing. They only had one place to go, and that was across the river. And you were starting to see, I started to see rents go up, and we had another 4% deal here that was getting the higher rents. And what we did is we went in there, and for some of the residents, we knew we had to start increasing their rents. So what we did is in the budget, we put a rent-up reserve in there to help some of those residents, help get them up to where they needed to be. And this was scattered site, and scattered site for an investor are hard to do. They're the hardest to manage. And I got beat up inside Cinnaire on it. I paid a premium price for this, and then when it was finished, I took our staff out to go visit this. And after they went and visited all these 50-something properties, I said, remember what I had to go through investment community? I said, what would you tell me now that you got there? I said, well, we should have done this. And I told them the two examples of how I saw housing disappear. And then on this one, I was a lot more mature. I was in a higher position in the company and a lot more say-so. And I said, most of these families will never know who we are, but we helped save their homes. So that one was big. This one is in the Inglewood neighborhood of Chicago, a senior housing in an area that I have a developer that I work with there. So that's it.